Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lindsay, a member of the CK-12 team, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar, Advanced Flexbook Editing. We're so glad that you're joining us. Before I introduce you to CK-12, let's just do a few quick reminders about Zoom. I think you guys are already very active in the chat window, and that is fantastic. The key to remember about the chat window is that if you want to send a message to everybody in the group, which is the point of the chat window, we want you to introduce yourself, talk about where you're from, what you're working on with CK-12. Do make sure that you've selected to send it to all panelists and attendees. That's the one kind of thing we see frequently is sometimes you send a message just to all panelists, which only comes to the CK-12 staff. So please, all panelists and attendees for anything in chat. And then the Q&A window is the place where we'd like to see any of your questions that you want answered a little more formally during our live Q&A and demonstrations. So also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, let us know if you're having any trouble with your video or your sound. So most of you are here as part of the Certified Educator program. I just want to remind you about a few of the important program links. You can register for a session at any time at ck12.org/jumpstart. And then to find out about the requirements of the program, office hours, session assignments, and archived webinars, you want to visit the program homepage at ck12.org/certified2017. So if you have any additional questions about the Certified Educator program, we're into week 2 here, you can still type them in the Q&A window, and our team, including Star, will help answer those questions. Right now, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Katie, who's going to get you started with today's content.
Thanks, Lindsay. And thank you to everyone who joined us for today's session on Advanced Flexbook Editing. In our Flexbooks 101 sessions, we covered the basics, including finding content on CK-12, simple edits, and sharing your content with students and others. If you missed that session, I highly encourage you to watch the recording or join us for the session in July. In this webinar, we'll be covering the following topics: incorporating, formatting, and citing images. This includes our CC BY-NC licensing, uploading, editing, and adding attributions, and then our figure versus inline options. We'll cover embedding videos and practice or quizzes within our content, and then using special characters and the CK-12 math editor, so options for dropdown or using LaTeX coding for including special formatting. And then finally, enhancing your Flexbooks and adding clarity. So all those extra little pieces that can help, from headers, subheaders, PDF versus on-screen view information, details and resources tab, etc. So our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand all of the options you have as you customize and enhance content on CK-12.
But before we get into the core content of the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about your knowledge of our editing tools. So we're going to launch a poll that you should be seeing on your screen. This is a lengthy one with lots of options, but we want you to look at each option and you can select all that apply. So tell us about your experience using and customizing Flexbooks. Select all that apply. I'm gonna let you read these on your own, and I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds here to select your answers. Got a lot of responses coming in. We'll give you about 10 to 15 more seconds here. Okay, it's looking to me like about everyone is finished. So we're going to go ahead and end the poll, and then I'll share the results with you. Kind of interesting here, of over half of you are new to CK-12 Flexbooks, and that's great. Hopefully you've joined us for the Adopting Flexbooks or the Flexbooks 101, where we covered some basics and some more of the why you might want to choose a Flexbook. Again, today's focus is going to be more on doing some of the more complicated edits, things to really customize your book. So a large percentage of you have used Flexbooks as is, which is great. You can grab and go if you need to. Some of you have made the basic edits, and then you can tell just a smattering have actually added images and videos and modalities and math editors, and made math editors, special characters, that kind of thing. So I think that is where Katie is going to get you guys all confident to use those tools moving forward.
Thanks, Lindsay. Let's just refresh a few points about basic customizing of Flexbooks. You'll see some of this again in this webinar as we work our way through, and we're happy to go through it if you have questions. But as we said, we're going to focus on the advanced components for this webinar. So start by clicking Customize to start any process, and you can pick a new title. And this is the same either from a content that you're starting with, or you can create a new modality from within your library. From there, you can delete and or reorder content pretty easily using that X option or the drag arrow option. You can add content via our menu on the left when you're browsing on CK-12. So that little search CK-12 or write a modality or add a new chapter. And finally, you can share content via a URL, groups, integrated learning management system, or the Share plane.
With that, let's have Katie show you the components of adding new images to your Flexbooks.
Thanks. So I just want to go through kind of the two screens that you're going to see as we work on images today. When you first click on the image option, you're going to see this screen on the left, that general image where you can choose your file, you can go through there. And then the other option is that image option. And we're going to talk a lot about that today as well. But make sure that if you forget kind of, wait, I need to add an attribution or I have to put something in, that you're clicking that other tab to get all of the other pieces that work with that. So at this point in time, let me share my screen. And we're going to go in and let's use a new topic that we haven't talked about recently. So let's pick a life science book. So I just kind of clicked my way through that. I know that was pretty fast, but if you're looking for content, you can pull it from the browse page. And then I'm picking this textbook. And as you can see, I can customize this on the left. And once it pulls that whole thing up, we're going to say for today's date, just so I can keep track of where things are as we go through. And we're going to open a section. So I can add any different piece in here. But if I open a section, I could open and then I can edit any section using this pencil icon. So it's going to take a second to go through that. And I'm going to talk about that figure options just so you can start seeing stuff while it kind of takes this whole book and solves it and saves it in my system. So let me click over for a second. And you can see this particular piece, the learn behavior of animals. So this is one that I started customizing separately a little bit earlier. And I put 3 different versions of the same image in there. So this is the version that was in there already, which you'll see in a minute. And then I added that same version as a thumbnail and as a full page option. So here, the thumbnail is just kind of, I just want that little quick image as we're working our way through. Here's a standard figure image. And then the full page, everything in our system for images is based on width. So if it's a short and long image, then you're going to want to go all the way across, and it will kind of be narrow, but all the way across the page. If it is more of a steep image, so like if I had taken this image right here and made it a full page one, it actually would be, in order to get the width to match, it would be so big because it's so vertical that it would run off the page if I was looking at my PDF. So just know that when we're looking at options, we're really looking at based on the width of any image that we're working with. And I can see these images here on that particular piece, as well as if I had downloaded this kind of customized read and looked at it, I can see the same images that show up on the PDF version of that. And here you'll note that this was the original image, so all the caption was in there. I didn't re-add it when I was demoing this piece. But the this is a standard figure size, which is your postcard size, and then the smaller thumbnail size, and then the full page size. And the one thing you're going to want to know is that if this was close to this text and it was going to run off, for any figure, this text at the bottom here could get bumped above it. So it will kind of help if you're looking to decrease the number of pages in something that you're working with, then that will help because you can kind of bump a figure to the next place. But if I wanted text that directly related to this to be underneath it or right above it, I'd want to choose an inline option. So that's kind of the biggest difference between figures and inlines. So let's go back here for a minute and say, this is my image for June 27th. And I'm going to save this particular read. And it's going to open up that read. And today we're going to work on just a couple of different reads within this book as examples for what's happening. So as we were saying, we have kind of that difference between the figure and the inline image that we're working with. We also want to talk about that attribution for a second. So let's say I wanted to add a new image of a dog, for example. This is all about animals as we're working through. I can use resources like Flickr or Creative Commons search, and I'm just going to pull one up here as an example. So in this case, this has noted as being an attribution requirement for this image. That's totally acceptable within our system. You just need to make sure that you're putting the source, which you can always find in the share piece. So I could pull that information, kind of that link to this page, and the actual person who made that image down here. So anytime I'm pulling that stuff, you could pull from wherever you're pulling an image that fits our license requirement, the information you need regarding who made that image, as well as the link to where it is. But you're just going to want to always check your compliance and make sure that you're pulling images that are allowed to be used within our Creative Commons license. So back to this page here. This is a clean version. So let's see if we can go from here. I can scroll down here and you'll see kind of an image here that's a figure as we worked with it. Another image here. And sometimes if you're having trouble editing an image, just click on the caption for a figure and you can insert and edit that image and it'll pop all that information up. So here's the image I was working with. And if I click on that image option place, you can see that it's a figure, that I included a postcard here. That's the size that I'm working with versus the smaller thumbnail or the full page. I added a caption. I even added a title and alt text. So alt text is stuff that if you're hovering over it or there's different kind of accessibility pieces that will read alt text to tell someone what that image is of, that's useful. And then the source for this particular one also came from Flickr. So it has that link directly to it and the credit for who actually made that image. So all of that information is in there. So you could adjust this for a different size. I could say, actually, instead of making this a figure, let's convert this to an inline image. And you'll notice a couple of things. One, that it now gives you the option to work with your pixel width. So kind of you could work off of a different piece. I could say, I want this to be 300 pixels wide. Now the caption is just for those figures because it's that kind of side piece of information that we saw earlier. So you can either pull it before you switch it to inline, or if you do this here, then it would kind of add that other piece and I could just delete that particular text as I'm working off of here. So that's one way to adjust your image. And here, if we just pull the rest of this text out, we can kind of delete and edit any other images that we wanted, and you can go from there. So a couple key pieces. You're going to want to upload that image. If I wanted to add a brand new one, instead of just editing one, you can do that anywhere that you're in regular text. So let's say I wanted to add another image of a dog. And we'll talk kind of later about dogs within CK-12. So let me choose an image file about that. And I can open that up. So I chose my file. You can use a URL. I tend to recommend uploading a clean image file in that sometimes URLs change if people move things on the web. And so they can get a little bit tricky. So if you have access to the full file, I recommend uploading that piece. And then I go back here and I can pick my inline image. I could add kind of that alt text there. So CK-12 dogs. And then this was taken by one of our team members. So I would put their name in there and then source would be the CK-12 Foundation. So you always want to cite your images to make sure that anything that needs that attribution continues to work their way through. And even if they're not required to have the attribution, it's super helpful to cite it because then people that are using that content know that they have the right licensed image as you're working your way through.
All right, Katie, we had a bunch of questions that came in about this idea of resizing images and pixels. So let me just give you kind of a survey of some of the questions. One user's asking, do we have to resize images prior to uploading, or can this be done in the images option? And then several questions relating to the pixels of what does that actually mean? Is there a recommended number to survey, to cover the whole page?
Yeah, so I would say there's kind of a couple of pieces. One, you can resize your pixel width in our editor. So just like I was doing there, if I go back in here and I edit this image, I can change that pixel width. Oops, it didn't snag it. So let's see if we can pull that up. So I can change this pixel width. It's coming in at 512 pixels. I could pick this to be 400 or something else like that if I wanted it, and you'll see it's a little bit smaller. I tend to aim for kind of 300 to 400, maybe, depending on what you're looking for. Once again, it's always based on your width as you're working, because a super tall, narrow image, I might need a larger pixel width to actually be able to see something in order to be able to do that, or vice versa. I might say, oh, it's so tall that I just want to keep it a little bit narrower as I'm working my way through. There's kind of two pieces that you should know. If you are converting and because you're working with customized content, you're choosing to do a PDF option. If you set the pixel width, it basically takes that, divides it by 782, and creates the width in inches along your piece. So I would try to kind of figure out, so let's say 400 divided by 72, it gives you like an approximation as you're working within there. So if you're not setting it, we assume that you probably inserted something with a significantly larger pixel width. And so we're dividing by a larger number to break it down. So if you're having difficulty, I generally recommend that based on the types of images that you're working with, you try a couple things out, see what size works for you for that particular read, see what size works for you with the images that you're working with when you convert it to a PDF, if that's what you're looking at, and then pick that standard and stick with it. So I adjust based on the image itself, whether it's a more horizontal or more vertical image, and kind of work my way from there.
Okay, and I think we have a help desk article that might discuss some best practices on images. So we're going to see if we can find that and put it in the chat window. Katie, a couple other questions. You were talking about like Flickr earlier as an example of a place where you can find license compliant photos. The question was, are all Flickr files okay to share? And I definitely know the answer to that is no. So hopefully you can review a little bit more about that. And then what did you say about not using a URL for the image? Somebody's wanting you to repeat what you meant by that.
Sure. So let me start with the URL piece. So in here, if I was editing this piece and you see a URL option here, you can choose an image from the web. That's not a problem. It's just that because web pages are updated so often, if you're pulling from an external source where they may update that image and therefore the link might not be as valid, you are more likely to get a mismatch in terms of what image you wanted in your book, versus if you have a full copy of that image and you upload it cleanly, then no one else can kind of change the direct link to that image. So not a problem, just kind of a best practice that if you have the full file, I recommend uploading it. For the answer to Flickr, no. They're not, for any search option that you're working with, if I just search dogs and search photos across Flickr, you'll see everyone's photos here, and any license option. These give you a lot of restrictions: commercial use allowed, modifications allowed, commercial use and modifications allowed. Because our system is built on the idea of the ability to customize our content, we really say that your best option is to do something that's in the public domain, or that, as I just had, only has an attribution requirement on it. It doesn't have any other restrictions on it. And that way you're never worried about kind of how it's being used within your school or something that you've shared out externally within CK-12. So I would definitely say make sure you're kind of filtering searches there. You can also start with search.creativecommons, which is what our license is under, and then kind of click on some of these options and then narrow down, and within any search from there, make sure you're pulling those ones that are open domain or that are attribution only. That's kind of your safest bet when you're putting images in there.
Okay, a few more questions again about this difference between figure and inline. So I know you had the visual example on there, and I guess just personally, when I usually work in the Flexbooks, if I don't need a caption to an image, or I can see where figures may be more relevant for a diagram or an infographic or something that needs additional information, that's when I choose to use a figure. But most of the time, if I'm just inserting an image for aesthetics, visual appeal, I would use an inline image and control a little bit more how I want that to look based on the width. So you might just have to, for those of you who are still trying to see it, our assignment after the session is actually going to ask you to kind of play with that example so you can see yourself what inline looks like versus what a figure looks like. So we've got a lot more questions, and I think many of them are going to be addressed here in coming sections. We do have requests to how to add a section from scratch. We've got some questions about publishing and what people say in different draft modes. So we're not forgetting about your question, but I think it's going to be answered in some coming sections. So if it's okay, I think our next section is on embedding videos in practice. So why don't we, we've got the images covered, we think. Let's move on to embedding videos, and we'll keep addressing your questions as we go.
Thanks, Lindsay. So once again, just a reminder about this draft versus finalize. I'm going to click keep as draft because I started putting random pictures in and I wasn't done working and they're all out of order. And so I'm not going to actually finalize that particular one. Plus, it allows me to stay within this table of contents. So I'm going to keep working from here. So if I switch over, if I had finalized that, then anything that I had been working on would have pushed so that others outside of my account that had access to that book would be able to see those updates. So that's kind of your working doc is your draft, and then when you finalize it, others can see it, but you can always go back and edit afterwards. So let's pick another one. We're still going to stick with animals today. And if I start editing this particular one, we're going to talk about different pieces from here and the idea of embedding within CK-12. So a couple of pieces to note. One, let's say I just wanted to embed a new video. So this particular video here, I searched for dogs on CK-12 to pull up some extra options. And if I wanted to access this via YouTube, I could always go to YouTube and watch it there. And we're going to just pause that so you're not stuck listening to the audio as well. But anytime you're looking for an embed code, you can share this either via a direct link, which we're going to use first, or the embed code. So if I go back here for a minute and I say, I want to add this in here. Let's say this image wasn't in here already. I actually think this is the particular video that we're working with. But if I wanted to add another section, and just to let you know, this little icon tells you that there's embedded multimedia. So I could double check this and see what it looked like. Sorry, let's see if we can pull that up. Well, we'll show you what it looks like in a second. So if I wanted to add something in here and I wanted to embed it, notice that because I'm within bullets, my multimedia option is actually grayed out. So you want to make sure that you're in just standard text that you're working with. So here, I now have this option to insert and edit media, or I could paste directly that YouTube video link, and our system will actually embed it for you. So option A is if you have a YouTube video link, you just paste it in there and our system will read it and embed it for you. So that's one choice. The other choice, I'm going to just go backwards for a second, Control Z or Command Z. I could go up to here and click on that video icon, and this is where I'd place my embed code. So if I went back to the video for a second, and instead of pulling the share code, I pulled the embed code option, I could copy that embed code, and I could paste it in here. And this is where I can preview what's going to be shown. So great, I have the right embed code, we're good to go. YouTube gives you kind of a standard iframe width and height. If you want to work with changing that, you're welcome to test that out and see what sizes work for what you're looking for. But that's a pretty good standard size video there. And that's all you need to do to embed that video. So if I then kind of clicked on it again, I could always go back and go from there. I'm not sure why it's reading as an image. You should see an edit embed option when you do that. But in general, that will get you your options. So that's your straightforward embedding video piece. Now, let's say I also wanted to include in this review some actual practice from CK-12 and not just questions that were in here. So I could go to a CK-12 modality. This is the same kind of assessment that goes with this read. And if I wanted to embed it directly into the read, then I would want to use this embed code from here. So I could click on this. I could go to the embed option. I could pull this content up. And I could then go back in. And I could choose to embed this as well. You can see what that looks like. And you'll now see this practice show up in here. Let's save this for a second, even in draft mode, so that you can see what those are starting to look like. So if I went down to here, I could save this whole book for a second, and then I could go to that particular section and see what it looks like. So section 10, or chapter 10, it's going to pull that content up. And it's going to show you kind of what that looks like as we're going here. And maybe I'll just shortcut directly to that piece. So here we go. And you can kind of see these different pieces. So there's the extra video that I embedded. Here's the practice that I embedded, and you can see what's happening there. So those are some options. We've also had some other pieces. And actually, I'll pull up a couple of options as we go through. If you have a Google slide as well, like presentation, you could use that particular piece. I don't think I have that right in this account right now, but I'll pull that up when we continue with Q&A. So you guys can see what that looks like there as well. But we've had some questions over time in terms of what we can use with this embed option. If it has an embed code, then our system will be able to read that and kind of put it in our system. So I know that there were questions about GeoGebra or Google Slides or things like that. So you can use the same process for embedding those other pieces as you work your way through.
Does that embed code work for Plixer simulations was the question that we just got. What are best practices for taking those pieces of content from CK-12?
So if I wanted to pull up a Plix, so let's say, for example, let me just move this piece here. I was looking at this Plix that has to do with kind of distances and different people, but still is related to my animals component and theme for the day. At this point in time, there's not an option to embed our interactives within your content. However, all of our pages on our site have this unique URL. So if I copy that URL and then I go back into here, I could say something like, check out this Plix on a dog park. Now, granted, the particular skill that Plix is building is not accurate for this topic, so maybe not the best choice that you're working with. But I could, if I wanted to add something else in that was related, I could always do that. I could copy this piece or highlight this, and here's our insert edit link, and I could just paste that link there. You can, anchors and targets are kind of more for those figures that we were working on. So right now I'm just going to stick to the simple URL and text to display. And then if I keep this as a draft and then it shows up within my content, I could actually go back to that piece again and we'll pull that up.
So several questions, again, everybody's brainstorming all the different things that you can embed, and just kind of our comprehensive answer to this question is, if it has an embed code, you can embed it in our Flexbooks. And I think that's true for pretty much everything with an embed code. So I was working with a district in Missouri recently, and the guy I was working with was concerned because he's done so much work with his Google Slides. And he's like, I want to take my presentations and put them in a Flexbook. And so by experimenting with a couple of the different file options in Google Slides, we were able to find the embed code that looks just like the embed code Katie was showing you for YouTube. And so we copied it and pasted it in the Flexbook. And then sure enough, the Google slide was visible. So for all these questions that are coming in about even some tools that I have no experience with, if you can find the embed code, try it out. Put it in the Flexbook, save it in draft mode, and go back in and see if it's appeared the way that you want it to appear. But we think it should.
So as Lindsay was just talking about for Google Slides, if you're looking to do that, in that file option, you can click the Publish to Web. And so there's a link to publish, or there's an embed code option there. And this same iframe will be your embed code, and you could use that within your book. So regardless of what it is, pull that embed code and use that to kind of add your piece in.
Following up on what you were talking about with YouTube earlier, we did have some questions about restrictions for YouTube videos, and a couple comments of how they should probably make sure that a link is still valid, and then curious of what the safety net is for content, where obviously teachers are the front line for any vetting of this kind of content, but maybe go back to some best practices on YouTube.
So I would say generally when you're looking at a YouTube video, see if it looks like it's copyrighted. So I know that we've had some videos that teachers have used that get pulled from YouTube because YouTube monitors their own copyright issues. And then they'll just get kind of this video is no longer available due to copyright restrictions, black screen instead of the video. So anything that looks like it's kind of a copyrighted piece that's probably going to get pulled down from YouTube, I recommend not including. Partly so you're not worried about copyright issues, and partly because you don't want your content breaking because you used something that got pulled from YouTube later. So I think that's one part in terms of how to best choose that piece. In terms of the question about how do you monitor content in here, so within CK-12, in our search bar options, so if I'm searching for, let's say, dog-related materials, we monitor and curate all of the content within CK-12 on a pretty high level that we're working with. We make sure it's quality content before we publish it. Anything that does need to get updated because it's linked externally gets updated as people notify us. And then the community contributed content, we encourage you guys to use and explore. And kind of if anything comes up that is a serious issue in terms of appropriateness or something like that, we will pull that content off of our site. But we go through and we ask teachers to continually, if you're going to use something from that community contributed piece, check it out, make sure it's what you want to be showing in your class. Different teachers have different standards on what they're willing to kind of demonstrate in their classroom. So I always recommend checking your videos or checking your reads and making sure that it's talking at a tone and a level and an appropriateness that's relevant for your particular setting.
All right, a couple more questions that we'll answer before moving on to our next section here. You embedded some practice earlier, and so users asking, do teachers see results from these embedded practices? And then another question that's similar about Plix. If they copy and paste that URL into the lesson, do they still need to assign it if they want feedback?
The answer to that is yes. So you can assign, so I can assign this read to my class, and our system will check that a student actually went into this particular piece and checked and accessed this read. If there's any extra pieces in here, if there's, that video, actually, let's go back to kind of the one we were working off of. If there's the videos that we embedded here, if we go back and continue to do this piece for section 10.23 that I was working off of, all of these extra pieces that I added in there are not separately tagged if you just assign the read as a whole. And right now you're not seeing that assign to class option because it's still in draft mode. So I would need to actually finalize it at least once to get some of it pushed out. But anything in here that I add in, so this video, which is also a modality on CK-12, I would have to assign separately. So I'd have to go in and assign this read right here, or this video right here. The Plix itself, I would have to do the same thing. I would have to assign it to the class. If you want to be able to see that modality separately from just, hey, the kid checked out this read, then you do need to assign that piece separately. You can make it easy for students to access that by putting it all in one read or enhancing your material by that, but anything that you want a separate report for, you will need to assign.
Okay, keep the questions coming in. We're going to be answering a lot of them throughout the rest of the session. But before we go on to the next section of content, I'm going to steal the screen back from Katie. And I want to show you, let's see if you guys are seeing that. I want to show you 2 short videos, like a minute long, very short videos of teachers customizing Flexbooks to best meet the needs of their students. The first clip is a social studies teacher named Jonathan Wood, who we met in Tullahoma, Tennessee. And the second clip is of an El Paso, Texas teacher who teaches chemistry named Jessica Favela Casillas.
My favorite thing about it is you can update, change content, adapt to what you need for that classroom. If I have some content on there that I think is not working, or the students don't like, or that I don't like, that it's just, for whatever reason, it's not working the way I thought it would, I can find other stuff and use other stuff to change those chapters and change the format of everything. I can also upload videos anytime I want to there, upload any pictures that I need on there, any other resources, you know, as needed. So that's what I like the most, but I can kind of form it the way I want to.
We were asked to reorganize the Flexbook that was already there and adapt it completely to EPISD and our curriculum, our scope and sequence. We added things that were student friendly, we added videos, and I think that was a really good experience because as a chemistry teacher, I knew what my kids were needing as far as a textbook, as far as content went. And I could rely on the textbook to have videos and interactives and any kind of visual that I thought they needed that they couldn't get in a standard textbook.
Okay, you can always see more testimonials at www.ck12.org/testimonials. We've got hundreds of them if you want to hear how other educators are using our tools in the classroom. But now let's move on to CK-12's options for including special characters and math formatting.
Great, so whether you're a science, math teacher, or another subject area and you want to add extra formatting for special characters, our special characters menu and or math editor will allow you to do that. So special characters is standard like Word, but we'll show you that in a second. And then this is our math editor, which has a couple different pieces. It has kind of those top menu options, it has some LaTeX coding options, and then has the preview for you to see what that looks like. So I think with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we'll actually go into what this looks like in a section. So while you were watching some videos, I opened up another section. This is section 4.9 within the same life science concepts book. So from here, you can see a couple of different options. This is talking about a particular model. And so if I needed to add any extra special characters, I could click on this little special character option. I could put in, less than, greater than signs, different like Greek letters if I needed them. So all of your standard special character pieces are in there. You're more than welcome to use any of those just in your regular text. If I wanted a more formatted equation, then that's when I would click on my math editor. And this can be helpful if you're doing special formatting for, pronunciation pieces and spelling, or you're trying to put in formulas. This particular one was talking about the Hardy-Weinberg model. So that includes a number of different equations that work from there. But I could start at the top, and I could click on kind of my function option. So I want to create a function. And then I want that function to be equal to P that I'm working with. Now, if you just want to use our drop-down options, you can kind of work your way in here. You could continue to add in extra, operations. I could put a fraction in there if I wanted to do that. And you'll actually be able to do all of this work within here. Totally fine. All of it will populate this coding. So if you don't know coding, just don't touch that box and you're good to go. If, however, you wanted to make updates to this and say, okay, I don't actually want any of this part in there, and I want to base this on f of a, then I could do that piece. And I could preview and see what this looked like, and it would show you this function based on capital A is p. And it has to do with alleles and percentages and all the rest of that piece. But I could do that formatting part there. I could change anything else. I could say based on A is actually 2 times P times Q. I could add in all of these different pieces and click preview. So if I add that in, you'll now see this nicely formatted equation within my text itself. This is what we said was inline. So actually, if I could put text before this or after it, the formula, etc. If I change this, I double clicked on it. If you want to update an equation, all you need to do is double click on it. At that point in time, because it's already based on code, you lose your drop-down options. You can still kind of use them if you add them in here, but then you would need to know how they worked. So if you need to format something using just drop-down, just start a new equation as you're working your way through. But that was an inline option. If I made this align at, that actually left aligns it on a new line. So see how it gets its own line that you're working through here? And I could similarly, if I wanted to, go back in there and make it block math. And block math, as you can see, centers that option. So that's a great option to work your way through. So as you're working kind of within the particular math editor, you have options for where it's showing up on your screen. So that inline option, which is in the middle of text, which is great for something like when you're writing the x-axis or something like that. The align at is left align. The block math is centered. And you can go ahead and click up here and use any of your drop-down options. Your Greek letters, for if you're looking for kind of different pieces, are in this Greek symbol. So let's just take 1 minute and show you where some stuff is. So you have your fraction options, your root options, including a square root and another like cubic or higher root, exponential options. We have our integrals. You have kind of all of your different absolute value, brackets, etc. options, some function options. This will allow you to do that little like -1 for an inverse function. Different segments or arrays or different pieces, your logs, your limits, your matrices, our Greek letters, operations, kind of some extra symbols mixed in there, summation and intersection pieces, and then your trig functions. So all of those are there. If you know other coding that you wanted to use for LaTeX, or if you think we're missing something, definitely let us know if there's something you want added to that menu, and we can talk about how soon that will go in there. You can write formulas for anything, whether it's math or otherwise. If you're looking for a particular piece, you can always use LaTeX coding here. The one thing that I would just note is that you can add a lot of extra super funky formatting using coding like that. But it doesn't necessarily always transfer to our PDF. So our PDF, I know, has a limited set of colors based on kind of your color options that you'll see up in here. And so if you're starting to use other funky coloring, if you're writing super crazy code for that, it may or may not transfer to our PDF. You're going to want to stick to kind of our standard colors here if you're working from there. But if you have any questions or you want to use other formatting, definitely let us know, but it can be used for math or for any other area that you're looking for. So I think that's kind of the basics of the math editor from there. Let's take a few minutes and pause and see what other questions we have, and then we'll go into the last piece.
A lot of questions are about publishing and sharing, so that's good because that still is coming up. I'm trying to see, still some questions that are kind of moving backwards. Maybe we'll save those. What about, we have an attendee who says that just having trouble customizing in general. When I click to edit a section, the only option I get is to change a title. So we've had a couple people who are kind of stuck on how to even get to all these menu options.
Sure. So if I opened, let's see if I can open a different one here that maybe was elsewhere. So this was a read that I customized in a different account. So as someone accessing it from elsewhere, the first step would be to click this customize option again. And then the first thing it's going to do is it's going to actually ask you to like write a title in here. So if you want to keep the title the same, you can do that if you don't have another version with the same title in your inbox. Otherwise, try to clarify which version you're working with by putting that in there. And then you can save that title accordingly. And once you save that title, that's when you'll get bumped into either the table of contents for the whole book or into editing the read, which is kind of where we are at this point for the other one.
Maybe while you're on that read, or if you want to go to a different read, let's show them how to add some clarity to their Flexbooks.
Sure. So let me, I'll just go back to the one I was working on because we had a math equation in there that might be helpful. So there's a number of other options within our formatter, kind of our standard Word, Google Docs, you know, bold, italics, underline, strike through, superscript, coloring. We have a couple of pieces here. If I highlight the summary option and I click on format, you'll see that this is a section 1 header. So what that means is that you have kind of a break as you're working from here. So it tells you that this is the biggest header. When I save this, I'll show you kind of a light horizontal line that helps visually break those sections within here. I could also create a subsection with a section 2 header or 3. And then most of your text you'll see is kind of paragraph formatted. So those are options that you're working with. Pre-formatted would just strip all the formatting out of there. So I would like to avoid doing that. So I'm going to undo that option. You have your standard bullets and lists. We have a couple, you can insert kind of a definition here. So if I was looking to insert a series of vocab and definitions, I could then type in my term and my definition. I could then navigate backwards or forwards. So now I'd get another term here. And then I could do the same thing, get another definition there. So you can kind of add terms and definitions that way. You have table options. You have a page break option. So this isn't super relevant when you're working online. But if I was actually printing, downloading and using a PDF or printed version of this, you would want to put page breaks in somewhere. If you wanted to kind of break maybe the review part at the bottom of here, I might want to put all these questions on a separate page. So that would be an option. Your tables, standard tables, if I added one in here, if I right click on a table, that's where all your table properties come up. You can add rows or columns, and you can actually even add a border or a table caption. So if I add a border here and a table caption, it gives me a space to put my kind of header really, and then it kind of blocks off the whole table piece there. We've talked about our math editor, special characters, images. Note that multimedia doesn't like to be inside other formatting, so just make sure that you're kind of outside that in standard paragraph format, and then it'll pop back up again. And now it's kind of one of my all-time favorite discoveries about partway through working here, which is this element box. So I'm a former math teacher, and every book I ever had these bright blue boxes that had all of the formulas in here. So that's really what your element box is for. So I could go in here, and I could actually kind of put these pieces in here, and then add, you know, my math editor equation. Could add a different one in there as we worked our way through. I could type in my options is p squared, and actually let me add in this piece just so you can see that. So if I wanted to add in other equations, that would kind of give me this element piece that I'm working with. And then also if I wanted to put my own horizontal line in somewhere and just break text without putting a new summary header, I could put in this horizontal line. And then our standard undo and redo options. Or if this screen is too small to work with, you can actually expand to full screen and work your way from there and kind of see how it works, or go back down. So those are kind of your pieces in there. I'm gonna finalize this draft for a second so we can see what some of those things look like. I know I didn't put a ton of information in that part, but you'll be able to see a little bit about what this looks like. And then I want to just go over a couple of things on where to add extra details or resources. So maybe I'll bump over to the other one while this saves, and talk about our resources tab and our details tab. So our resources tab, if you're within an editor, you can actually upload files. So if you have a worksheet that you've been working with that you'd really like to have kind of there, so this isn't the latest version, so I would need to be in kind of that latest version. And then it would give me the option to upload any PDFs or Word docs or things that I wanted to add to there. And then the Details tab, in this case, because it came from CK-12, it already included a description, some learning objectives, all of the people that have worked on various versions of this book as we kind of have edited it or made it from there. It has the life science tag, it has grade tags, and it has our concept node. And that concept node is really just kind of the concept on CK-12 for learn behavior animals. So those are all resources. You could add another concept if you wanted to add it. You could, if you're, added content from somewhere else that you needed to cite who the author was for a good chunk of that, that's definitely a place that you can kind of add sources that you were working from. So those are all of those pieces. So let's go back to that page for a second now that it's saved. We're going to look at what some of that looked like that I was just working off of. So here's that element box that we're working with. Here's that centered formula, your nice little horizontal break there, some terms and definitions, and a table. And then, as you notice, I didn't add a horizontal break here, but because it was a new section, it automatically visually put that in to help me kind of see what that looked like. So those are that part. And then we had a question about the general book as a whole and kind of where to edit content at the chapter or book level. So let's go back into there for a minute. And this came up the other day, and I want to make sure that I show you that piece because I realized that we probably didn't clarify that. So for the book as a whole, you'll see the same resources and details tabs. So this has kind of all the information for the book. And in this case, the answer key is added as resources for this book. And then if you wanted to edit a particular chapter, this pencil icon, not at the kind of read levels within there, but at the chapter level will pop up your chapter information. So you can edit the title of the chapter, the description, you can include an introduction and a summary as you're working for, and then any of that attribution details that you need to do so. So those are other places that you can kind of add in information for any book.
Okay, so you guys are just going to have to get into a book and you're going to have to try this out. A lot of it's very intuitive if you've worked in other documents, Word or Google Docs. And then some things are kind of specific to our system. Before you create a ton of chapters and sections on CK-12, you probably want to standardize, how you're going to deal with your section headers and, what you're going to have your main text look like. So we have an assignment coming up for you that we're going to talk about in a minute that is going to ask you to get in and do just that. And then we're hoping that as you have questions, once you actually get in and try this, that you'll reach out to us if you're still needing some additional help. I think the important thing to touch on here, since we have a lot of questions about publishing, why don't we talk about that? And to do that, let me take over the screen again and make sure everybody's clear on what we mean with this publishing bit.
Yeah, so as you're saying, kind of what happens, how do I publish it, where does this work? We wanted to go through a couple key pieces of information. So you can see on the left side, that menu option, which was on the left side of kind of any saved work that I had worked off of, as long as I've finalized that, at some point in time, I can publish the latest version of it. So that's all you need to do to publish it. You click on that, it puts a pop-up window, you can kind of go from there and you can publish it, whatever you need to do at that point in time. And we really want to talk about the benefits to publishing. So there's kind of one for you and one for the larger community. Once you published it, then your students could access it via search if for some reason they couldn't find it in their homework assignment or something like that. You could basically allow people to access it easier than just with, you have to have the direct URL to access that particular page. And then the other thing is that, we've created this environment and this platform that allows users to republish content to it. And so all of the work that you're starting with, unless you've started a book from scratch, you're actually starting from work that other people have already created and they put time and effort in to help you in your class. And so we really encourage you to consider republishing to that community and continuing to add to those resources so that other users can do that. And if you started a book from scratch, then I highly encourage you to do that if at all possible, because it's something that helps us build out the options for especially non-STEM areas. So I would recommend doing that piece. And then the questions about what happens when I publish it. So the minute you publish it, other people can search it via our search bar and then click on that community contributed tab to access it. And then you can go one step further. You can actually add your published book to your school page. So for example, if you have a number of different departments in one school all publishing books, that's a great place for students to know, I just have to go to my Tullahoma page or my El Paso page or my Coeur d'Alene page or any of these other district pages that have a number of books there, and the students can find all of their content in one place. So I think with that, we're going to go over some final logistics. So one is the tools and apps page. We're talking about Flexbooks specifically today. So both our online and offline access for Flexbooks, we have that app, and we also have that ability to access offline via Chrome these days. So that's something to check out, as well as our practice or simulations app as you go through.
So just to be conscious of time as we're approaching the hour mark, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of wrap-up information and talk about your assignments. But then we're sitting on a lot of questions, so you guys who want to remain on after our wrap-up information, please do. I think we're going to cover a lot more details about this advanced editing. But as for the assignments, you can access it at this tiny URL at the top of the page, which is tinyurl.com/CEP17edits. And your assignment is going to ask you to do the types of things that Katie was doing during this demonstration of going into a book, incorporating images, trying to embed a video or something else you're looking to test with those embed codes, maybe trying some special characters. And then, we try to plant a seed of how you could start thinking ahead about using this Flexbook with students. So you can write down that tiny URL. It's being posted in the chat window, or you can always find all of your assignments listed on what we're calling kind of the program homepage for the summer, which is CK-12.org/certified2017. So you can come to this page, look under each session information collapsible menu option there, and you'll see the assignment. And then down at the bottom of this page is where you find all of the archived sessions. It takes us about 24 hours to get the sessions recording up onto YouTube and posted on this page. And you'll always receive emails from us about 24 hours later that include this information as well. So some upcoming sessions you might consider thinking about using Flexbooks with students. Tomorrow morning, Pacific time, is a great time to talk about, now that you know how to build a Flexbook, how to customize a Flexbook, what are all the different ways you can actually use that in a classroom setting with students. Same thing with using practice in groups with students. We just try to give you a lot of ideas of how to make this meaningful to really help with engagement. And then we offer our first Maximizing Learning with CK-12 session on Thursday. We've got more coming up in July, but for you guys completing the full certification program, that is the second required session that you must attend. And we try to encourage you to do that at the very end as we kind of book into your experience with some final tips of how to use CK-12 and how to wrap up our program. If you need to register for any of these, you can do so at CK-12.org/jumpstart. And then the last form that we like to mention, this is not a part of your assignment, but we do check after every session and every day. We look at the feedback that you guys are sending us. If you're compelled to tell us something that went well or something that we could do better, go to the tiny URL, CEP 2017 feedback. That's the same link for every webinar session. You tell us which session you attended and what you liked and didn't like, and we try to make improvements as the summer goes along. So thank you. You are supported. You can email us at support@ck12.org and reach out on social media as well. You can @ us at CK12 Foundation or use the hashtag CK12 Foundation as well. So for those of you who need to go, head on out. For the rest of you, let's tackle some of these questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we had a couple of questions about attributions and the piece that I was just showing. So I'm going to steal the screen back from Lindsay again. And these details, if you are copying and customizing a CK-12 book, it will carry those attributions through to your customized version. You don't have to go back and open that book up and see what the attributions are and add them back into your book. It will carry kind of throughout your piece the previous attributions. Now, if you happen to customize a chapter or a section and then you deleted all the content in there and started from scratch, and we're just using it as kind of a framework, and you needed to get rid of these for some reason, because basically you've wiped it to a completely clean slate, you have the ability to do that. But in general, I would recommend just kind of leaving those pieces in there and adding to it if you're adding in extra pieces. So that does auto-populate. It does carry through. It doesn't necessarily auto-populate. So we had a question about what shows up. If I added attributions for an image, let's actually look at, this is the kind of image we were working with earlier, and learn behavior of animals. It has this information in it. And you'll notice at the end of an individual section or at the end of a chapter, if you're kind of including the entire chapter, you'll see a list of references. And so this has who that is, and then actually the link to there for that image that we were working off of. So if you add the attribution in the image piece, then it will carry through to the references within your book. So that is an option. If you're adding other objects, you would want to kind of include that citation below it or add it to the resources page. But the places that we have a clean spot for that citation, whether at the chapter level, in the details piece, or in an image when you're adding it, you can cleanly add it in that piece. And I think I answered if you're both the like what populates and what goes through from there. We had a question about kind of getting a specific page from a Flexbook into Schoology. And so let's talk about that for a second. One, I'm going to go to a different page that hopefully is, I think we're all in edit mode at this point in time because I've been working with a lot of pieces. Any information about Schoology, you're definitely going to want to check out our tools and apps page. So that has information about getting that set up. Once you have that kind of key attached to your Schoology account, you can access content within that Schoology piece. So you don't actually need to embed content within Schoology. It's already accessible within Schoology. And so what you would then want to do is anything that is a CK-12 resource, you can just search for within Schoology and open up. Or there's this add to library option. Now I've customized this particular read, so it's already in my library. If there's something that another user has made or a particular read that you want to work off of and assign within Schoology, and it's not one of CK-12's original ones, you can just simply add it to your library kind of at that read level, or what we call the modality level. I know we had a question about what a modality is. And so these are all modalities. They're all different ways of learning. So whether that's a video, a study aid, a real-world application, a practice modality, a bunch you'll also see interactives, so chemistry and physics simulations or PLICs, like the one we showed earlier today. Those are all modalities within our system. They're ways of learning. And kind of at that lower level for reads and videos, you're going to want to add those to your library, and then you'll be able to access them directly within Schoology, so there's no need to embed it because they're already there. So I think we're going to see what other questions we have. I know those were the ones I had first, so we'll take a minute and look. We had some questions in terms of what you were allowed to use CK-12 for. We are licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License. So if you're using it in a way that you have any particular questions, I would recommend that you contact us directly, and then we can talk about your particular situation and whether or not CK-12 would be appropriate for that. Without knowing kind of the larger context, that's not a question that I can answer specific to any one situation. If you're using it for non-commercial use, you are welcome to customize and edit and use our resources in your class. We have a question about kind of different pieces in here that I was working on, that table. So let's go back into here to that section that I was working off of. So I think that was 4.9. We're working, yep. So let's open that back up again, and I can show you what that table looks like. While this is saving again for a second, someone said they didn't feel like their question was answered for something. If you want to just kind of rephrase what you're looking for specifically, we can try to answer that better for you. So back to that table that we're working off of. So if I go here, when I insert a new table, let's actually do a brand new one. So just you can see kind of that whole process. I'm going to go out of that space, insert a table, and I can pick my table size to start with. So whatever size you want to work off of, that's your kind of starting place, and then you could start typing in, this is, an example. So whatever that looks like, you could right click. So once I right click, that's when you get your table options. You can, delete a row. Let's say I don't actually want this row. It can go away. You can right click again. I could add a column, or I could delete a column. Let's say I just wanted back to 3 columns without that text. Or I could click on the table properties option. And that table properties allows me to add things like a border. So the border now includes that information. It allows me to add a table caption. So the table caption is actually kind of the text that tells you, almost like a caption for a figure. It's really just telling you what that table is about. And in this case, you'll see it show up as kind of the title of that piece. So you could do that particular part. So you can play around with those pieces, but here's where your title comes in as the table caption. So the question regarding embed code for molecular options, if you have an embed code that you can work with there, you are welcome to test run that and see if it fits your requirements for what you're looking at. So far, people that have embed codes for their content are able to do that. Just double check kind of depending on where you're pulling that from. If you make a Google slide presentation, you have full rights to that. You can embed that. You don't have issues. YouTube allows you to kind of embed externally. Make sure the program that you're working with is allowing you to access that and embed that in other places. And are there copyright issues linking to different things, whether that's Desmos or elsewhere? You would need to check with their copyright. I don't know what their current copyright is. I know at different points in time, I think that people have used various graphs and kind of visualizations from GeoGebra or elsewhere. But I have not read Desmos's copyright requirements in the last little while. So I would say check with them. If you have any questions, if at all in doubt about copyright issues, my recommendation is to check with the source of where you're pulling that content, because they have the answer on whether or not their material is allowed to be used within our license. We create a very clear license option, but other people using it, that we go from there. And is there a webinar that goes through assigning content to students? Yes, there is. Groups in Practice 101. If you wanted to watch the recorded version, you can find all of our content on our program page /certified 2017. So you could go from there, go down to Groups in Practice 101. You'll see kind of the information about that and the post-webinar assignment. And then if you go all the way down to all of our archived webinars, we have been posting recordings of this, so you can watch the matching video that goes from there, or you can sign up for our session in July to join us for that. So we have a couple last questions regarding accessing Flexbooks within a Flexbook app. If you are looking to access a customized Flexbook right now, you need to access it and then open it in the app. We always love feedback from users on their requests for kind of what happens next. And if you were joining us for our general webinar, we are a small team of about 35 people that do all of this work and all of this content. So we'll continue to add that to our list of requests, and then based on priorities on what happens, we will consider including that in the future if that makes sense from us. And then we have a question that says, what will happen if you feel like you looked into copyright for a source and you think it's okay to add and then it's not? If we get notified that something is included on our site that isn't license compliant, we'll definitely let you know. But it is your responsibility to check that. So once again, as I said, your best option if you have any doubt on whether or not it's available is to contact that source, because some of the schools and districts that have made all of their own content, so I know like Tullahoma in Tennessee did a ton of work with social studies, and they pulled whatever resources they knew were available that they were allowed to use within our license, and then they went out and they contacted each source that they wanted to pull additional material from and got permission to use that within their books. So if there's something that you're not 100% positive on, then I would recommend contacting that source and just confirming that piece from there.
Okay, we have cleared out the Q&A window. So last call here as we get ready to sign off of today's webinar. Last call. Okay, we're going to go ahead and end today's meeting. So we will see you guys again soon. Thank you for joining us today.